The moment my son-in-law's face went white as a sheet and my daughter grabbed the edge of the dining table just to stay standing, that was the moment I knew every single thing I had done over the past 6 weeks had been worth it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started, because the ending only makes sense when you understand what came before it. My name is Arthur. I'm 72 years old. I spent 34 years as a structural engineer. Raised one daughter mostly on my own after my wife Barbara passed from a stroke when our girl was just 23, and I have never in my life asked anyone for anything I wasn't willing to earn. That's not me boasting. That's just the way I was raised, and the way I tried to live. Barbara and I had built something real together. A 3-bedroom house in Columbus, Ohio, paid off entirely by the time I was 65. A retirement account I had contributed to for decades without touching. A small savings account I called my just-in-case fund, because Barbara always said a man without a backup plan is just a man waiting to fall. I kept that advice close. I kept it close long after I lost her. After Barbara passed, I stayed in the house on my own for 4 years. I cooked my own meals. I mowed my own lawn. I drove myself to every doctor's appointment and grocery run and church service. People in my neighborhood used to wave at me from their driveways and say, "Arthur, you're something else." And I would just wave back and tell them I was managing fine. Because I was. I genuinely was. It was my daughter Nicole who first suggested I come stay with her and her husband Derek. She called me on a Tuesday evening in late September. I remember because I had just finished watching a game and was eating leftover chili at the kitchen table. And when she said, "Dad, Derek and I have been talking, and we really think you should come live with us," I felt something warm move through my chest. I thought it was love. I thought it was my daughter looking out for her old man the way Barbara would have wanted. "We have the guest room," she said. "It's just sitting there empty. And honestly, Dad, we worry about you being alone in that big house." I told her I would think about it. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I walked through every room of my house and I talked to Barbara's photograph on the mantel, the way I sometimes do when I need to think something through out loud. I told her Nicole was asking me to come. I told her I wasn't sure. I told her I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. What I didn't tell her, what I couldn't quite admit even to myself, was that I was lonely. The house was quiet in a way it had never been when she was alive. And some mornings I woke up and the silence felt less like peace and more like something pressing down on my ribs. So I called Nicole back and I said yes. I want to be clear about what I brought with me when I moved into their home. I brought my clothes, my books, a box of Barbara's photographs, and my financial discipline. I did not give Nicole or Derek access to my bank accounts. I did not hand over my retirement savings. I did not sign anything over to anyone. I paid them $800 a month toward household expenses, my idea, not theirs, because I was not raised to be a guest in someone's home without contributing. I drove myself to my own appointments. I paid my own phone bill. I kept my financial life entirely my own. What I also brought, without realizing it, was trust. And that, it turns out, was the most dangerous thing I had in my possession. The first few months were good. Nicole made dinner most evenings, and I would help clear the table and wash up. Derek and I watched football on Sunday afternoons. I babysat their dog, a beagle named Rusty, when they went away for a weekend in November. It felt like family. It felt like the right decision. I noticed things starting to shift around mid-November. Small things at first. Nicole asking, almost casually, whether I had updated my will recently. Derek mentioning over dinner one evening that a buddy of his had set up a power of attorney for his father, and it had made everything so much simpler. Nicole asking if I had thought about what would happen to the Columbus house if something happened to me, and wouldn't it make more sense to just go ahead and sell it rather than paying property taxes on an empty building? I answered each question the same way. I always answer questions I'm not ready to answer. Carefully, without committing to anything. I said I would think about it. I said I had a lawyer I worked with, and we kept things updated. I said the house was fine, that I had a neighbor keeping an eye on it, and that I wasn't in any rush to make decisions. Nicole smiled each time and said, of course, no rush. She was just thinking out loud. I noticed that she smiled the same way after each of those conversations, A small, patient smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I filed that observation away. I didn't know what to do with it yet. The night everything changed was a Thursday in early December. I had gone to bed around 9:30 because I had a cardiology follow-up early the next morning, and I wanted to be rested. My bedroom was at the end of the hall on the second floor. Nicole and Derek's room was across from mine. The walls in that house were not particularly thick. I had been lying in the dark for maybe 20 minutes when I heard their voices. Not clearly at first, just the low murmur of two people in conversation. I wasn't trying to listen. I genuinely wasn't. But then I heard my name, and something in my body went still in the way it does when your instincts know something before your mind catches up. I stayed completely quiet, and I listened. Derek's voice, low and certain. We need the power of attorney locked in before the new year. Once we have that, the house is easy. Nicole. He's not going to sign it voluntarily, Derek. You know that. Derek. So we get the doctor to say he needs help managing his affairs. He's 72. He's had 2 cardiology appointments in 3 months. That's plenty to work with. A pause. Then Nicole. And if he figures out what we're doing? Derek. And I will never forget the flatness in his voice when he said this. Where's he going to go? He sold his furniture. His neighbor's renting his driveway. He's got nowhere else. By the time he understands what's happening, it'll already be done. I lay in that bed and I did not move. I did not make a sound. I breathed slowly, and I let every single word settle into me like cold water. My daughter, whose college tuition I had paid in full, whose wedding I had contributed $40,000 to because she wanted the venue she wanted and I wanted her to have it, whose first car I had co-signed for when she was 22 and just starting out. My daughter was lying 12 feet away from me, talking about how to take control of my finances and my house before I was alert enough to stop her. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark and I thought, and I planned, and I remembered something Barbara used to say. The time to fix the roof is before the storm, not during it. The next morning I went to my cardiology appointment. I smiled at Nicole over breakfast. I told Derek the coffee was good. I acted like a man who had slept soundly and had nothing on his mind. I have found, over 72 years, that the most useful thing you can do when someone underestimates you is let them keep doing it. From that morning forward, I moved with intention. My first call was to my attorney, a man named Gerald whom I had worked with for over 15 years. I did not call from the house phone. I drove to a pharmacy 3 miles away, sat in my car in the parking lot, and called from my cell. I told Gerald everything I had heard, word for word, as precisely as I could reconstruct it. Gerald was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Arthur, how soon can you come in?" I saw him the following Monday. I told Nicole I had a follow-up with my cardiologist. Gerald and I spent 2 hours going over everything. My will was already solid, but we made it stronger. I updated my beneficiary designations on every financial account. Retirement, savings, everything. I added a trusted friend of mine, a man named Raymond, who I had known since we both worked at the same firm in the 90s, as a secondary contact on all my accounts, with specific written instructions that no changes could be made without his countersignature. Gerald also advised me about the power of attorney situation. Under Ohio law, no one can be granted power of attorney over a competent adult without that adult's willing signature. Any attempt to fraudulently obtain one is a serious matter. I asked Gerald what kind of documentation would be useful if it came to that. He told me. I spent the next 5 weeks being the most agreeable houseguest my daughter had ever seen. I want to explain why, because it might seem counterintuitive. I stayed because leaving abruptly would have tipped them off. It would have ended the situation without resolution, and they would have simply found another angle, another approach, another moment when my guard was down. I needed them to feel confident. I needed them to keep talking, keep planning, keep assuming I was a 72-year-old man who didn't understand what was happening around him. I also stayed because I needed to document things, and documentation takes time. I kept a small notebook, Nothing suspicious, just a worn little spiral notebook I had always used for grocery lists and reminders. I dated every entry. I wrote down every conversation about my finances, every reference to the house, every time Derek mentioned the power of attorney or Nicole brought up my will. I wrote down dates and times and exact phrases I could remember. I also, quietly and without drawing any attention to it, installed a small digital recorder perfectly legal in Ohio for personal use in your own residence in my room. I am not proud that I felt I needed to do this in my own daughter's home, but I needed to protect myself, and I did what was necessary. 3 days before Christmas, something happened that accelerated the timeline. I came downstairs for a glass of water around 11 at night and found Nicole at the kitchen table with a folder of papers spread out in front of her. She startled when she heard me on the stairs and swept everything into the folder quickly, but not quickly enough. I saw the heading on the top page. It was a power of attorney template, partially filled out. My name was already typed in the appropriate line. I pretended I hadn't seen it clearly. I got my water. I said I couldn't sleep and asked if she wanted me to make some tea. She said no. She was just finishing up some paperwork. She was heading to bed. I said goodnight and went back upstairs. I called Gerald the next morning from my car. I told him what I had seen. He told me that a pre-filled power of attorney document, without my willing signature, was worth nothing legally, but that the intent was clear, and the documentation we had was building a meaningful picture. He also told me he had taken the liberty of consulting a colleague who handled elder financial abuse cases, and that if I wanted to proceed further, there were options available to me. I told him I wanted to handle Christmas first. Here is what I want every person watching this to understand. Nicole is my daughter. I love her. I loved her when she was a little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap during late movies, and I loved her when she stood at the altar and I walked her down that aisle, and some part of me that I cannot reason away loves her still. What she was planning to do was wrong. It was a betrayal of everything I had given her and everything I had trusted her with. But she is still my daughter, and I did not want to destroy her. I wanted her to understand what she had done and face the consequences of it honestly. That distinction mattered to me. It still does. Christmas Eve. Nicole's plan was a family dinner. Her mother-in-law was coming, Derek's brother and his wife, and a couple of their friends. 12 people total around the table. Nicole had been cooking for 2 days and the house smelled like roast and pine and candle wax. And if you didn't know what I knew, it would have looked like a beautiful thing. 2 hours before the guests arrived, Derek found me in the living room and sat down across from me with a manila envelope in his hands. He set it on the coffee table between us and said, "Arthur, we've been meaning to talk to you about something." Nicole came in from the kitchen and sat on the arm of Derek's chair. They were positioned like a team. They had planned this moment. Derek pushed the envelope toward me. "We've been thinking about your situation," he said. "Your house in Columbus. Your accounts. It's a lot for you to be managing on your own at this point. We thought it might give everyone peace of mind if you let us help you handle things going forward." I looked at the envelope. I looked at Nicole. She gave me the small, patient smile. I said, "What exactly is in there?" Derek said it was a power of attorney document. He said it was simple, just a formality, just to make sure that if anything ever happened to me, there was no confusion. Nicole said it wasn't a big deal. They just wanted to be able to help. I picked up the envelope and I held it in my hands, and I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "Let me think about it through dinner. We can talk after." They exchanged a look. Nicole said, "Of course. No rush." Derek smiled, the smile of a man who thinks he has already won. I set the envelope on the side table next to the armchair. I left it there. I went upstairs and I made one phone call, and then I came back down and helped Nicole set the table and acted like a man with nothing on his mind, because I had done everything I needed to do, and all that was left now was to let it happen. Dinner was pleasant. Derek's mother complimented the roast. His brother's wife asked about my engineering career and seemed genuinely interested when I talked about some of the bridges I had worked on. I ate well. I laughed at the right moments. I refilled my water glass. I was the picture of a contented old man having a nice Christmas with his family. After the dishes were cleared and people had moved to the living room with their coffee and dessert, Derek said, casually, to the room in general, "Arthur, did you get a chance to think about what we discussed earlier?" He did it in front of everyone. I understood then that this was intentional. He wanted witnesses to my agreement. He wanted people in the room who could later say, "Yes, Arthur seemed fine. Arthur seemed to understand. Arthur said yes in front of all of us." I said, "Actually, yes, I did think about it." I stood up from my chair, and I'd like to share something with everyone before I give my answer, if nobody minds. I walked to the side table and picked up my phone. I had already pulled up the call before dinner. I pressed play and set the phone in the center of the coffee table where everyone could hear it. Derek's voice came out of that small speaker, clear as anything. "We need the power of attorney locked in before the new year. Once we have that, the house is easy." Then Nicole's voice. "He's not going to sign it voluntarily, Derek. You know that." Then Derek again, and I watched his face while his own words played back in that quiet living room. "So we get the doctor to say he needs help managing his affairs. He's 72. He's had 2 cardiology appointments in 3 months. That's plenty to work with." Derek's mother set her coffee cup down. Derek's brother had gone completely still. The 2 friends looked at each other. Nobody said anything. Nicole's voice came through the phone. "And if he figures out what we're doing?" And then Derek's flat, certain answer. "Where's he going to go? He sold his furniture. He's got nowhere else. By the time he understands what's happening, it'll already be done." I pressed stop. The room was absolutely silent. Derek's face had gone the color of old chalk. Nicole was gripping the arm of the sofa with both hands, and she was staring at the phone on the coffee table like it was something she couldn't understand, like the fact of it existing didn't fit into anything she knew about the world. Derek's mother said, very quietly, "Derek." Just his name. Nothing else. But the way she said it carried everything. I said, "To answer your question, no, Derek. I won't be signing anything." I picked up my phone. My attorney's name is Gerald. He has copies of this recording, the notebook I've been keeping for the past 5 weeks, and the power of attorney template that Nicole had on the kitchen table 3 nights ago with my name already typed in. I paused. "The Columbus house is not for sale. My accounts are not accessible to either of you. And as of last Monday, my friend Raymond is listed as a secondary contact on every financial account I have, with written authorization required for any changes." I looked at Nicole then. I looked at her directly, and I let myself feel all of it. The love, the grief of it, the furious sadness of standing in my own daughter's living room and having to do this. I let myself feel all of it, and I still said what I needed to say. "I am 72 years old," I said. "I have 2 cardiology appointments in 3 months because I have a good doctor and I take my health seriously. I mow my own lawn. I manage my own finances. I drove myself to every single meeting I have had in the past 5 weeks, including the ones I didn't tell you about. I set the manila envelope on the coffee table next to where the phone had been. I am not confused. I am not declining, and I am nobody's easy target." I told Derek's brother I was sorry he had to hear this in his family's home at Christmas. I told Derek's mother I had always thought she was a decent woman, and I hoped she still was. I picked up my coat from the hook by the door, because Raymond was waiting outside in his car, had been for the past 20 minutes, because that was the phone call I made before dinner. I stopped at the door, and I looked back at Nicole one more time. "I'm not pressing charges," I said. "Gerald advised me I could, and I am choosing not to. That is the Christmas gift I am giving you." I let that sit for a moment, but I am also not coming back to this house. And whatever relationship we have from here, if we have one that starts from the truth, not from this. Then I walked out. Raymond had his heater running and an old Marvin Gaye record going low on the radio, because Raymond has always known how to read a situation. He handed me a coffee and a travel mug when I got in the passenger seat. He didn't ask how it went. He just pulled away from the curb and drove. And I sat there with the coffee warming my hands and watched the Christmas lights go past the window. I want to tell you what happened in the weeks after that, because I think it matters. I moved into a furnished apartment in a building about 4 miles from where Raymond lives. It is clean and quiet and has a good view of a small park from the kitchen window, and I have taken to drinking my morning coffee there and watching the dog walkers come through in the early hours. I like it. I like it more than I expected to. The Columbus house is still mine. I went back and had the locks rekeyed, not because anyone had a key to it, but because it made me feel better to do it. I am in the process of deciding what I want to do with it. Maybe I'll rent it. Maybe eventually I'll sell it on my own terms. To someone who doesn't know my name already and doesn't have a folder with my signature line pre-filled. The decision is mine to make, and I will make it when I'm ready. My retirement savings are intact. My accounts are exactly where I left them. I have a cardiologist who tells me my numbers are solid for a man my age, and a primary care doctor who says the same. I walk 30 minutes every morning. I cook for myself. I call Raymond on Sundays and we argue about football, and he is usually wrong. Nicole called me 3 weeks after Christmas. It was a short conversation. She was crying and she said she was sorry, and she said Derek had convinced her it was the right thing to do, and she never meant. And I listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, I told her I heard her. I told her that sorry without changed behavior is just a sound, and that I needed time. She said she understood. I told her to take care of herself. Derek has not called. I have thought a lot, in the months since, about how it happened. About what combination of things led my daughter to a kitchen table at 11 at night with my name typed into a form she hadn't asked me to sign. I have thought about money and fear, and the particular way people can convince themselves that what they want is actually what's best for someone else. I don't have a clean answer. I'm not sure there is one. What I do have is this: a clear head, a working heart, a bank account nobody else can touch, and the knowledge that when it mattered, I did not panic. I planned. I documented. I protected myself with the same patience and precision I would have brought to any structure I was asked to build over 34 years of engineering. You don't build something that lasts by reacting. You build it by understanding the forces working against you and designing around them before they can do damage. I am 72 years old. I live alone and I am not lonely. I take my health seriously and I manage my own affairs. I have a friend who argues with me about football on Sundays, an attorney who returns my calls, and a park I can see from my kitchen window where dogs run in the early morning and the light comes in low and gold over the grass. I don't know what the future looks like. None of us do, at any age, but I know what it doesn't look like, and that is enough. If you are watching this, and you are my age or anywhere near it, I want you to hear me say something directly. Protect yourself. Not because your family is planning something, not because the people around you cannot be trusted, but because your financial independence is your dignity, and your dignity belongs to you, and no one who loves you genuinely will ever ask you to hand it over. Keep your documents in order. Know what you have. Know where it is. Know who your attorney is, and call them more than you think you need to. Don't sign anything you didn't ask for. And if someone in your life starts making you feel like your age is a liability, like your independence is a burden, like the sensible thing would be to just let someone else handle things, pay attention to that feeling. It is telling you something true. I am not a cautionary tale. I am a man who listened, planned, and came out the other side standing on his own 2 feet, exactly where he intended to be. And if my story helps even one person think twice before they sign something they shouldn't, or ask one question they otherwise wouldn't, then every minute of those 5 careful weeks was worth it. Thank you for spending time with me today. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every one of them. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, a parent, a friend, someone going through something similar, please share it. Sometimes the most useful thing one person can do for another is simply say, "You are not alone in this, and you are not powerless." Not by a long shot. Take care of yourselves out there. I'll talk to you again soon.